Welcome to Tipsy Cheeseman, where we drink, you listen.
And we gossip.
This week we're going to be talking about mental health in general, but also growing up as
Hispanics got the twisted tea.
she's twisted tea. I got green apple Smirnoff. Our sister's fiance got very triggered because I did a last video. It was her.
I always do it.
It was her, but it was zoomed in on me. So this week's disclaimer is that there are going to be a lot of sensitive topics being told throughout the episode, and so if any of it is triggering for you, just listen or watch with discretion or skip the video and just join us next week instead.
Yeah, I won't provide any information for any help at the end of the video as well, and links below.
Yes. Also, para los que viven en México, el número que encontré para la línea de crisis aparentemente es el mismo el que usamos aquí, pero no sé si eso es verdad, pero es lo que encontré en el internet. Así que si es algo diferente de lo que yo puse, por favor ponlo en el comentario o mándamelo y lo puedo poner ahí. There's a lot of culture stigma when it comes to mental health. If you're not, granted, this is another disclaimer, if you're not American, which again, some Americans might have the same stuff that we had or have. So we're not putting them in this circle of, oh, everyone's the same, but just in general, from what I've seen being here, I think they're more open to talking about mental health.
It's not as a taboo topic. De todo hay. Así que también hay otras culturas que sí no es tan tabú. Hay generaciones o familias o lo que sea de cualquier otra cultura que también sí son más abiertas o cerradas, lo que sea. So
I feel like the number one thing that we're all thinking right now is that men don't cry or shouldn't cry. And I think that is something that we grew up with, but we also grew up with our grandpa that was very open about crying. Like, he was a very emotional man and he cried with a lot of things.
I feel like he would try not to, though.
And our dad, for example, doesn't cry. I think we've seen him cry a total of 4 times in our lives.
Me on the operating table.
That's right. That's the most recent one, I think.
Yes. Me acuerdo de ver la cara de todos así de preocupación y ansiedad y todo, pues lo que estaba pasando no era algo muy leve o lo que sea, pero en mi mente dije yo, o sea, no es tan serio. Pero ya nomás me acuerdo de abrir los ojos y ver a mi papá encima de mí llorando, dije, a la madre.
Again, not all women are emotional too. There's some women that don't cry over every single thing, and so I think that's how some men are too.
Yeah.
But I think with my dad, it definitely is the stigma of you can't cry. You have to be a tough one. And I do remember when my grandpa's funeral was going on and everything, my dad and I were the ones that were greeting people to come inside because, I mean, not everyone was from that city, and so they didn't know what the deal was or anything like that. And unfortunately, it's also a common thing to you have to host people still at a funeral despite your grief and everything. And so I do remember my dad told me you're not allowed to cry. You have to be the tough one. And I think he was telling me that because of the sense that he wanted to, but he kept telling himself not to cry, and so he kind of put it on me. And I mean, I
see that.
I don't hold that against him or anything like that.
Men can cry, but they feel like they need to man up because that's what they've been told: man up, don't cry. Men are not allowed to cry. You're a man. Stop crying. Tough it up. Rub some dirt on it. Keep going. And I mean, that goes for guys and girls. I mean, I feel like we also grew up hearing that, suck it up, keep going.
Te voy a dar una razón para llorar.
Son cosas que se nos enseñó desde chiquitos o sea, no nosotros, pero a otra gente que se pasa por generaciones, son cosas que se va pasando por generación. Ya cuando creces se te sale como naturalmente decirle a tus hijos también, porque es algo con que creciste. Así que tampoco no le he hecho mucha culpa a las generaciones anteriores de estar
Yeah.
diciendo eso por lo mismo, que son cosas que siempre se han hecho y dicho.
And
Pero,
I also know like why they say it. Like
yeah,
the reason is because look, there's worse things happening. Like why are you crying over a spilled drink?
again, it's totally fine because I don't think, I mean, everybody's different. I think you need to be able to process your emotions. If you're sad, be sad, cry it out, let it all out. That's healthy. But you also have to learn how to navigate when to get over it in a way.
Yeah.
When like yes, it's not at the end of the world. Feel go through the emotions, feel the sadness, feel the grief, feel all of it, but realize that you still have to move on because this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep pushing, such as with Luisita.
Luisita's our baby sister that passed away when she was 6 months old from liver cirrhosis. It's a genetic thing that runs in our family.
So when she passed away, there was a lot of things such as like when my grandpa's passing, like some people had to suck it up and be strong. Some people had to keep going. My mother had three other kids that she had to take care of. We were all small. She did have family help.
She was 22 years old.
Yes, she was very young, and with a child that just passed away, with three more kids, like it's tough. And she has to grieve her own child too, and then still have to be strong enough to keep pushing for her other children. Hay muchas cosas que pasaron que los contamos como chiste, I guess. Que se le iba así que nos llevaba al mercado en vez de llevarnos a la escuela.
Mm-hmm.
Cosas así que siento que le damos mucha luz positiva a eso, pero reflexionando en todo eso, era porque estaba pasando por mucho emocionalmente y mentalmente y todo, y no buscó ayuda tal vez porque no tenía los recursos o no tuvo
el tiempo,
la oportunidad. Sí, pues, o sea, no estoy diciendo que tenía problemas y no quiso, o sea, no es porque no quiso, no es eso, es porque pues la vida es la vida y antes siento que no se daba tanto el platicar de salud mental. Mi mamá es de ese tipo de personas, es ni modo, tengo que seguirle, tengo que seguir chingándole, tengo que seguir adelante porque tengo esto y esto y esto pendiente. Así que yo siento que también por eso duró tanto el dolor, tanto de procesar todo eso, porque no estaba, o sea, sí lloraba y todo eso, pero no dejaba procesar todo eso.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people helped her like while Luisita was sick and everything. Mm-hmm. Like her, my dad, and me for a little bit. We were all in Minnesota where she was in the hospital. She was hospitalized. And so obviously like Leslie and our other sister would stay with our aunts or with our grandparents and like everything like that. So I think she did get a lot of help while she was sick, but then after like when she actually passed away, like at that point, and it's common for like most people, like if your neighbor's dad passes away, you know, you give them lasagna, you help them out for
not the lasagna.
It's such a common thing.
I know though, yes.
And
comfort food.
Yeah, and so you help them a few weeks, a few months maybe, but then for you it's not the same because you're not having to grieve the same grief as a mother. Like she lost her baby. And so I think that's when she needed help the most. And yes, she did have help.
Yes.
Again, with family, with a few friends maybe. But she, I think, needed more help than she actually got. Obviously, she's still grieving, like to this day. And it's
tough.
Hard. How many years later? Like, so 19 years later. And I mean, she still grieves her. But we were like, I don't know, I think I was maybe 5th grade when I like vividly remember it kind of being the last time, but she used to sleepwalk. She had this like she had very super vivid dreams, nightmares, and it was her having to go to the hospital to take care of Lucita. And it was years after she had passed.
Yeah.
And I remember like she would fully grab her keys to go drive, and Leslie over here would come and tackle her onto the bed to like keep her down. And like she would just be sobbing her eyes out and like, no, like I need to go, I need to go. And Leslie like she didn't even say anything. She just pinned her down.
Because I mean that was years later,
It was
but
years later.
even like right after, I went to therapy for that. I
Mhm.
remember that because I got the help. I think through school. I think that's how it got brought up. So it's not like they were closed off to therapy or
You
like
grew up in the U.S. too, so it's
yes, it's
different experiences.
yes, definitely for sure. During that time, I don't have a lot of memories in that way. But growing up, yes, there has been a lot of times where she needed that extra little help and outside world triggers stuff. So during that time, there was a lot going on though. That when she was sleepwalking, it
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of stuff.
I mean, it gets brought on by stress a lot of the times, and like if you add outside life stress to grief, it makes it even worse. Obviously, I don't think she slept walk since
During that time,
10 years ago.
yeah, it was during that same time I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that during that time, it was like I said, a lot
Every single night.
because we would sleep in the bed with her, and
Yes.
I I would just like jump on her so she
Don't you
wouldn't
tackle
go
her.
because I
Leslie
remember
was a strong little kid.
I remember during that time we were sleeping in the other room, and I
Yeah,
remember one
across the
time,
house.
yes, so you couldn't really hear it because it was like the garage door type of things,
Mm-hmm.
so you couldn't really hear anything. But I remember one night just hearing a lot of commotion, and when I went out, my dad was like yelling at her, my grandpa was yelling at her, my grandma was yelling
That's
at
the
her.
exact night that I remember, and I was sleeping in the living room.
You were sleeping in the living room.
So the living room was right next to their bedroom. It was in between my parents' bedroom and my grandparents' bedroom. And that specific night, like I'm pretty sure she was about to get
she
into
was
the car.
in the car.
Yes, she was
She
in
was
the car.
in the car.
And that's how everyone was yelling at her.
But it was still kind of new. Like that was like I feel like one of the first times like
Yeah.
it got that extreme in a while.
I was always trying to kidnap babies to replace my sister.
Do you think that's why you were so obsessed with babies growing up?
I think so. Do you think that the therapist and all that you went to helped you at all?
The thing is, I don't remember too much of it. I remember like snippets of it. I feel like it might have helped me process
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to believe that she
Mm-hmm.
passed away. So I feel like it did help me process it and understand what it meant that she had passed away.
Yeah.
Emotionally, no. I think it just helped me process it and kind of like put a band-aid over it, but not really like help me heal fully from it.
So I think it just varies on like each person, and you're very much an advocate of like everyone should see a therapist and whatever what a doula. For me, I think that although a lot of people think that I don't process my emotional stuff, I think I process it in a very different way of like,
Which is valid.
yeah, I don't think there is a correct way. It's just for yourself. Like, I don't always cry with like other people. Like, even though something hurts me, I won't cry in front of them. Not because I don't want to be seen as weak or anything like that, but I just feel like I can grieve better if I'm on my own. Like, it's 2 a.m. and I just want a good night cry, so I watch The Notebook and I just cry about everything.
Well, I feel like I can relate sort of. I'm a crybaby. Soy bien chillona, para todo lloro. Pero, por ejemplo, cuando falleció mi abuelo, yo me acuerdo que sí quería llorar, pero como vi a los demás llorando, dije, no puedo llorar, tengo que estar ahí por ellos, o tengo que mostrarme de cierta manera. Y con mi abuelo sí fue una persona que cuando falleció duré mucho tiempo para poder procesar ese sentimiento
Mhm.
para poder hacer todo eso, because I didn't allow myself either to grieve, and not because
I did like 2 years after.
same.
Oh, cute. And like when you're driving in the car and you just want to cry, and you
Yes.
put on a crying playlist and you just cry.
Yes.
I think that's healthy.
I think it is, if you understand why you're crying and why you're
Yeah.
grieving and like all these things. I feel like, and that's why you always have to find your right therapist too. So
Mhm.
finding therapy and help doesn't mean it's a cookie cutter type of thing. You can't just go anywhere willy nilly and be healed.
Yeah.
First of all, therapy, in my opinion, I do think everybody should go to therapy. You need to find the right therapist to
Mhm.
begin with, the right person, because you don't want, everybody's needs are a little bit different. So maybe you want somebody to just hear you out. Maybe you want somebody to give you constructive criticism. Maybe you want somebody to be a friend. Like, it's a little different for everybody.
Yeah.
So you have to find the person for you and what you need, to heal and process and all those things. Even then, with therapy, the kinds of therapies that you do are also different.
Mhm.
So, like you said, maybe for you, healing is crying in the car. Maybe for me, healing is going out for a run. Maybe
Mhm.
for somebody, it's cooking. Like, it can be different for everybody. So, no hay una manera de decir, ah, es que me
This is what you
dije.
need to do.
Ya, no, cada quien es diferente. Somos personas, somos individuales. Cada quien procesa todo muy diferente. Cada persona toma tiempos diferentes. Hay veces que una gente no necesita unas 2, 3 semanas. Hay gente que necesita 5, 10 años. O sea, cada quien es muy diferente.
I don't think there's a lot of knowledge when it comes to therapy because, like, for me, I always thought therapy was something where you, like, told your problems to a person and they'd be like, well, it's probably because you had a rough childhood, and then that's it. Like, how does that help you? Okay, like, thank you for telling me my childhood sucked.
People don't know, like, what it actually is. Because I've talked to a lot of people, I'm like, you need to go to therapy. But again, I don't say that to be like rude or anything. Everybody should go to therapy. Like I said, there's different kinds of therapies. So there are some people that will just listen. For me, at first, when I first started going to therapy again, I felt like I just needed somebody to vent out to that wouldn't judge me or biased towards, oh yeah, it's because you're right on this or you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I just needed a vent when I first started doing therapy. Now I do want somebody that gives me that, like,
Advice.
yes, that's like, well, this doesn't seem right. Just so you know, like, maybe these are better options for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do feel like I need a navigator a little bit more.
And I think that for me personally, I can't open up to a stranger. I'm gonna sound like those people on The Bachelorette right now. I just don't open up to everyone. Um, but I can't open up to a stranger. Like, to me, that's off to me, and so that's why, like, for me, it's opening up to people that I can trust and that I know have the best interest in heart and that know me.
Si alguien me pregunta, ¿cómo estás? Yo siempre te voy a decir, estoy bien. I always put up a front. Yo estoy bien, todo en mi vida es perfecto. O sea, no perfecto, pero, o sea, intento de dar mejor luz positiva, siempre. Así que no me dejo ver débil, which is an issue. No me dejo poner en ese tipo de lugar, pues. So when I first started going to therapy, para mí fue muy difícil abrirme. Llegaba y me decía, ¿cómo estás? Bien. Y ella así que, ok, ¿por qué estás bien? O sea, entonces, ¿para
Mm-hmm.
qué estás aquí, no? Pero para mí sí fue muy difícil al principio poder abrirme. Siempre cada vez que he empezado con una terapista nueva, siempre se me dificulta al principio por lo mismo, porque yo soy de, todo está bien, yo estoy bien, mi vida ha estado bien.
I do know that you should go to therapy even if you think you are in a good place so you don't put yourself in a bad place. For me,
Yo.
um it is like a different experience. I have trust in my sisters and my husband. Occasionally, like,
Her husband.
I'll occasionally confide in, like, my parents, my cousins, my grandparents. I go to the people that are closest to me just because that's what I'm comfortable with. And so I think eventually I would start leaning into therapy and all that, just because you're not always gonna have those people. Like eventually, like right now, like I'm about to move away, and it's just gonna be Jared and I.
For example, the therapist that I'm seeing right now, she gave me like a pamphlet that I need to go through and like reflect on and all these things. And one of those is like positive interactions, social interactions, something like that. So I had to list people that I can talk to. So whenever I feel, because I mean the therapist, everybody sees their therapist a little different. I see mine once every 2-3 weeks, so they're not gonna be there for me every day. I mean, unless it's an emergency, then yes, but they're not gonna be there for me. And the point of therapy is to keep working on yourself actively. That's another thing. You can't expect them to fix your life.
Mm-hmm.
Ellos no están para resolverte todo y decir, no, mira, eso tienes que hacer, porque al fin y al cabo es tu vida y tú tienes que hacerte responsable por tus acciones y por tu vida. Y si tú no te quieres mejorar, nadie te va a poder mejorar. Tú tienes que querer mejorar y hacer el esfuerzo de estar mejorando. Y eso es lo que quiero yo. Yo quiero, o sea, quiero seguir yendo a terapia porque, repito, siento que todos necesitan terapia, aun en las buenas, porque es como un, like a little cushion of safety in a way, pero you need to work on yourself pretty much. They gave me that tool and I have to make myself accountable and use those tools provided. So one of those tools is talking to my people. Like I had a list. Who do I want to talk to? Who do I socialize to that will hear me out when I need it? And like, so like, yes, you do need that. Like you do have that right now.
Yeah.
And it is a tool that, for example, I was provided to do. I think everybody's mental health journey is very, very different. I started therapy not knowing that I needed therapy. I always knew I wanted to go back and I needed it, but I just wasn't ready to process everything. So
were you diagnosed like the first time you went?
Yes, when I started talking, they're like, okay, well, it looks like you have a lot of problems. I was told ADHD.
What?
ADHD, bipolar, depression, anxiety, social anxiety, and it's I forget the wording for it, but it's basically having a hard time with changes, adjustment disorder or something like that. And I think that's it.
Do you think you can like categorize yourself into like one specific one where you're like, yeah, this one explains me the most?
A diagnosis?
Yeah, like from the ones that you've got. Do you think you like lean more towards one than the other?
Definitely ADHD.
Really? I think
bipolar?
I think I see you more with the social anxiety part. Like I think that's your strongest one.
And that's what I mean. That's when we play games, it's something so dumb. I know it's dumb, and like I just can't get over it, and it's hard for me. And I try, like it, but it, like internally, I can't. It's very so like this is hard for me. It's easier because it's just the camera. Public speaking sucks. Do you remember when I had to read? When Becky got sick, I think she got sick or something, and my mom made me read a church lecture, and it's literally just reading it from the book, but I had to walk up the altar, open a book, and read in front of I don't know how many people, but read in front of people on a podium type of deal. Like for me, that was such a stressful thing, and I was just crying the whole time because it really stressed me out. But I did it. Yeah, I feel like, for example, me with all my diagnoses, I don't think I do handicap myself.
Yeah,
I feel like I want to actively work on doing better, and I feel like I have been. Like, listen, I'm making more interactions because me a few years ago, I would have never even gone out of the house in that sense. I wouldn't have opened myself up to making friends. I would have stayed closed off and only talking to people that I interact with because I have to interact with. I know that I'm human and I will make mistakes and all those things, but I'm not gonna blame it on my like, oh, it's because I have this that I'm not gonna do this. It's learning and bettering yourself. I'm like, okay, sí, yo sé que tengo este problema, pero no lo voy a dejar definirme, voy a mejorar.
Since I know that I have this, I'm gonna do this to do this, like to
Yes.
create a task. Like if you were given the task, like for example, in soccer, where they put you on the spot and they're like, oh, you have to bring one of your parents to be a lion.
Again, that causes me so much stress.
But I think you come kind of prepared now. Like the very first time, it was like, what? But I think now, since like okay, since I struggle with this, like when I go up there, I'm gonna do this instead of doing this. Like whatever you're
Yes.
comfortable with, but not instead of you being like, no, 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 like can you go instead to me? Like you still go up,
Yes.
And so I think that's the scary thing about getting diagnosed with things nowadays.
Yeah.
Because like since mental health is becoming more talked about and everything now, more people are finding that help that they need. And
Which is
because of
good.
that, yeah, it's a good thing. But because of that, like so many people are being diagnosed with mainly anxiety, depression, things like that. And so they use that as a excuse.
As a handicap. It's a spectrum in a way that my anxiety might not be as bad as somebody else's anxiety.
Yeah.
Your anxiety isn't as bad as my anxiety, and that's fine. We all experience things very different because we're individuals. But you shouldn't let that handicap yourself.
Yeah.
Do the work, find stuff that works for you to be able to manage life. Like in soccer practice, where Mateo needs me to go up and like interact with other parents, I'm not gonna tell the coach, "Hey, I have social anxiety, so I'm not gonna do that." No, I have to be able to manage. I mentalizo mucho. I'm like, okay, how am I gonna say this? What am I
How
gonna
am
do?
I lying?
I really have to like use my tools that were provided by my therapist and try to just process it and be present for Mateo because I need to be.
Now, all this is not to say like the people that haven't been diagnosed with something don't struggle in life. Like they haven't found the tools or the correct
Resources.
the resources and all that to get a diagnosis. And so I think people also have like a wrong perspective of that sometimes. Oh well, you're not diagnosed, so like whatever. Like me, for example, when I was little, I used to pass out. I would have panic attacks and I would pass out. When I was younger, I think there was a lot of stuff that I was going through. But either way, like, I mean, I grew up, I'm here, I'm alive and everything, and I don't have that issue anymore. So I think that I just got like a different way of managing it. Like, for example, she would read to me, and so not the fact that like her reading to me helped, but I think it was a distraction of like just breathe. And I think it was Grey's Anatomy that actually helped me with that because I think one of them had a panic attack, and the girl, she said, describe something that you can see, describe something that you can hear, describe something you can taste, describe something you can feel. Those certain things are something like that I still use today. Like if I can start feeling myself like panicking a little, I'm like, okay, just think for a second, just breathe. And I think that helps me a lot. And I've been surrounded by a lot of people recently that medicate themselves because they have severe anxiety, depression, whatever it is that they have. And, they tell me it's because you don't know our struggle because
You're not diagnosed.
exactly, you don't know my life. You don't know like what I've gone through or anything like that. So I don't think it's fair for them to say that to me. But I tell them, I'm like, I get anxious too. I think everyone gets anxious.
Yeah.
You may have it more severe than me, yes, but you can't judge for someone for not having something as severely as you.
Yeah, and I feel like again, we're all humans. We all have a life. You can't. And I think that's why another reason why we kind of started this topic. I mean, this podcast, in a sense that we've gone through a lot of stuff and we don't always speak on it, not because of anything specific. Just that's how it is, and we haven't really opened.
Because from what we've seen, like
Yes.
everyone's getting so triggered by some things that we've said, and we haven't even said like a lot of bad things.
No.
We haven't said any bad things. We've told stories, but we haven't said like any extreme stories is what I'm trying to get at. And yet like people are still getting um a
They feel
defensive.
attacked.
Yeah.
And like we're not talking badly about them in the sense that we're not judging their character. We're talking about stories that happened to us
Mm-hmm.
because it's stuff that we've gone through and we were processing and like all those things. So for people to get offended for that is kind of crazy. But hey, whatever. But my point was everybody goes through stuff. Everybody goes through life. Everybody has their own challenges. Like you said, we haven't had an easy life. So they don't know your story. They don't know because you're not going to you don't meet people and start telling them like, oh yeah, when I was 5, my cat died. When I was 6, like, and not judging people that do, but everybody's different. Yeah. You don't. So they don't know what you've gone through, what you haven't gone through, and if you're going through issues or not. Maybe you didn't have the tools or resources growing up to actually find the help and the diagnosis. Again, because everybody's a little different. I did get that help when I was young, but y'all didn't, and you guys needed help too. And it's not like, and then again, it's not like, oh, it's because they didn't want you guys to get help. It's just that's just the way it happened.
Yeah, I still think it was because we were so young that it was different. Like we just managed it differently. We processed it differently or whatever.
Now it's so like more talked about, less taboo, like more known. I think it is very important for me, for Mateo to go to therapy for a lot of different reasons, but it's something that needs to be processed. And even young kids go through stuff, and it's known. Like even babies go through so much trauma, and they like absorb all that, and they grow up feeling that trauma for, and they don't even know why. But sometimes you can be depressed without having any like kind of trauma per se, because your body isn't producing the right things or is overproducing certain things. So like sometimes it's not necessarily feelings, sometimes it's just chemistry. So in that cases like that, I feel like medication, pues sí, es lo único que les va a ayudar, because maybe they're not feeling, they don't have stuff like that, you know? But there are cases where it's more emotional, where those things need to be healed and processed through like therapy and finding help and like all those things. Medication can help.
Yeah.
And will help.
If it is necessary, because I know so many people that they just tell someone that they're sad and boom, medication. And it's not meant for them. Like the medication is for people that have severity of whatever it is that they need. Like you said, like actual things that they're underproducing or overproducing. And so the medication just makes it worse because I've noticed just recently that a lot of the medication that they use for humans, they literally use it in dogs because the medication is a sedation. Like it's not meant to be like, oh, here you go. This is gonna make you happier. It's literally meant for your brain to just
like. I'm diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, and all those things. But I feel like the way my mom raised us, I already had some tools to help me manage those things. Plus, therapy is teaching me new tools, new resources, all that stuff. So I don't feel like I need medication. I've always said if I get to that point where I do need medication, just like as that extra help, I would like it, but I'm against it for myself because I don't want to feel like that. Because I know a lot of people that do feel like that they just turn into zombies in a sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the right way for me because I want to manage it. I want to be better. I don't want to just accept it and be like, well, I guess, you know?
And we're not judging people that are on medication. If it is actually helping you, and it is something that the doctor has told you, you need this, of course, by all means, you need to be on that medication.
We're not doctors.
I think that everyone should try and manage it in other ways first. If that doesn't help, go that route instead. Because, I mean, simply by just me going outside and feeding the chickens, I feel like
I talked about
that's so therapeutic.
Listen, I said because she was talking about how she misses doing that, and I said yes. To me, like just being outside with the chickens for like 10 minutes, it's like distraction completely. A form of therapy.
It's extremely therapeutic. You guys need to get chickens. So just managing it in different ways and healthy ways, obviously. And despite what some people have said, no, we are not managing our traumas, our sadness with alcohol. Again, going back to like us having the resources here, like in Mexico, for example, I have never heard of until just recently, but like my aunts or my cousins or anyone like that over there that goes to therapy. Like we have one cousin now that I know about that she has been in therapy, but everyone else, like it's so hard for them because the cultural stigma, because of financial reasons, like the pay is horrible over there. Why? For them, it's kind of a sense like, why am I going to be working so hard, but then all my money is going to go towards this where I need to pay rent, I need to feed my mouth, I need to have a roof over my head, like all those things. And so that's not prioritized for them. It also depends on like where exactly they're living in Mexico because there's some areas where there literally is no help for them. Obviously, like Mexico isn't the only country that struggles with this, obviously. But since we are Mexican, it's something that like obviously we're going to talk about
We
because
can talk on because it's our experience.
I definitely hope that one day we'll be able to get everyone like the resources that they need. It's such a scary world in the sense that like if you do need help and you don't get it, like you're running your life at risk. Um the military, for example, like it's very common. My job career, it's very common for people to commit suicide because they don't have those resources or because
of the stigma behind it.
My husband, when we first started dating, there was just one random night that he called me sobbing his eyes out, and I found out that his neighbor, because they lived in a fourplex, so they all shared walls in between their houses and everything. And his neighbor that was right next to him had shot himself in his room, and like it was so loud, like you can hear it in their house because again, like simply a wall that they're sharing. And that guy's wife and kids were home when he did that. And like you never know, that bullet could have gone right through the wall. That is so scary. I mean, you personally have lost someone to suicide.
I remember hearing it in the news or whatever. I don't remember how I found out, but I just remember before going to school hearing that somebody my age, around my age, in my school had committed suicide. And I just had this weird gut wrenching feeling, and I'm gonna cry. I remember going to school and being kind of unsure, and then when it was finally announced, it was a close friend. At that moment, we might not have been as close, but we grew up. Like I known her since elementary, and she went through a lot of stuff. Like her life was not easy, and she was such a smiley, bubbly person. Like I really I don't know what was going through her head. I don't know what at that moment she was going through. But like the day before, I had seen her because we would arrive at school almost at the same time, and I remember saying hi, like, and she was good, happy as always. And I do think everybody goes through life. Everybody goes through their own challenges, but maybe if she would have found some kind of different support system, some kind of help, some kind of professional help, somebody that she could lean on, all that stuff, she would have been able to feel more comfortable and not have to feel like she needed to do that. She could have probably still gone through it, but maybe she just didn't have the right support group. And it happens, you know?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to read this off the phone. There is a national suicide prevention hotline that, like I said, it so says online that it's available for Mexico and the U.S. because it's national, nationwide or whatever. But the number is 800-273-8255. It supports for anyone that is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts. It is available 24/7, and if anyone is ever in that situation, just get that help that is available to you. Um, but let's end this on a positive note now.
We all go through stuff. It's just trying to find our support system, our way of navigating, and finding the help that you need in different kinds of resources, whether it be a friend, a person, a family member, therapy, like just in general. Find your help, and yeah, we just all go through stuff. Life is life, and that's what it is.
Bye.